Welcome to The Topic, where we highlight Houston Community College, our programs, our students, and our reach into the community. I'm Todd Duplantis. So what do you think when you hear the word hippie? Maybe images of Woodstock or tie-dye t-shirts? HCC history professor John Moretta joins us here. Thanks for being here on The Topic.
Thank you.
I'm very interested in this book. Seems pretty cool. It's called Hippies. Tell me the title of the book and a bit about it.
Sure. It's called The Hippies in 1960s History. And it was a book that I've been thinking about writing for a long time. There's just, the 60s to me is one of the most transformative decades without question. I mean, every historian, you have a consensus about that. When you look at the 60s, everybody thinks of, you know, the hippies, and they have a very stereotypical image of the hippies. And so one of the motivating factors why I wanted to write this book was because I wanted to dispel a lot of those stereotypes. If you look at the hippies, like you mentioned earlier, you have this stereotype of tie-dye and smoking dope and reefer madness and, you know, acid rock. Historically, we've dismissed them and kind of reduced them down to the cliched triad of, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Mm-hmm. They were much deeper than that. Right. Much more profound movement. If you look at the history of the American counterculture, you can date that all the way back to, say, the Romantic period, 1820s and 30s with Emerson, Thoreau, etc. Their legacy is probably even greater than that particular movement, counterculture movement. We've always been we've always been a nation filled with history of countercultures.
Right, right.
And the hippies probably represent, for our generation, say post-World War II generation, without question, the most defining movement.
When you see people who consider themselves hippies back in the 60s and what they've become nowadays, it's amazing, you know, and I've also seen cultures of hippies, people that call themselves hippies, that transcended into the 80s. From friends of mine who used to travel around, follow the Grateful Dead, they wore the t-shirts, and now these guys are like restaurant owners and accountants, you know? And so I've seen that, and is this something that carries on throughout the generations, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think there was a slight kind of, I call it a moment of aberration, when many former hippies, struck it rich like you just mentioned, became the yuppies of the 80s. But when I was looking at that, looking at the research and the data, that was only a very small percentage of the hippies who became, quote, yuppies. Right. If you look at most of the old hippies of the counterculture, and I include in the counterculture Students for Democratic Society, the student radicals, the activists, all the different affinity groups that comprise the counterculture of the 60s, many of them, if not most of them, have pretty much remained true to the kind of core values of that era.
So even though they may not look like it now, they're still a hippie at heart.
Oh, sure.
You don't change. You don't change your stripes, right?
No, I have not changed mine. Yeah. 38 years with HCC.
Does your book cover the various aspects? You know, we talked about Haight-Ashbury before we went on camera, but you know, the San Francisco scene, the music, the politics of the time, and I guess the attitudes.
Yes, all of the above. The book is 14 total chapters, but the 13 cover virtually every aspect of the counterculture. If you look at the history of the American counterculture, they don't really self-destruct. Right. There are inherent tendencies that could lead to self-destruction, like the drug scene did with many. But American capitalism, if you think back to the 60s, very quickly, to be a hippie became chic and vogue and cool. Yeah. The hippie movement in particular, more than any of the other affinity groups, became very quickly commodified by American corporations and capitalism.
And we had Woodstock pictures and, of course, you know, several versions of albums that are even popular today.
Exactly, and it continues. And like I said, one of my overarching themes was, you know, what happened to the hippies? Sure, it's easy to dismiss them and say, oh, they self-destruct because of the drug scene. That's not accurate at all. They were very quickly commodified. Many sold out to the capitalist record companies, i.e. Grateful Dead, all the big bands. And then also the mass media at the time. The television and primarily magazines, not so much newspapers, but like Time and Look and Life. Those magazines very quickly destroyed that scene.
And that continues today.
It does.
John Moretta, we appreciate you being here to join us on The Topic. If you'd like to know more about his book, you can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on the publisher's website on your screen. I'm Todd Duplantis. I will see you next time on The Topic.